Hi there, especially if you've never seen me before. I'm here to talk about some serious stuff and show you some interesting things, but I hope we can have a little bit of fun. I'm just going to start off with my bona fides. I was born in the 1950s, so I qualify as an old man. Um, I am a stage 4 cancer patient. I just a couple days ago completed radiation. Uh, and that was combined with oral chemotherapy. Uh, I have another cancer that I'm getting another check. It should be fine, but I'm getting another checkup next week. So this is something I live with. I've been living with for the past year, and I've done a bit of research and some experimentation. I've found some interesting things and some things that worked out pretty well. And I'm going to be talking today about CBD, hemp flower, as it's commonly known. It's basically industrial hemp, a very recent development in the production of industrial hemp in the United States. Just within the past couple of years, there's a market that's emerged for what is called CBD hemp flower. You can also purchase other parts of the plant called trim or a mixture of flower and trim. Um, and it was developed specifically by special breeding to have the flower characteristics of its drug cousin marijuana that has THC as the active ingredient. Being industrial hemp, the stuff we're talking about today, uh, is not marijuana. It has less than zero point 0.3 THC in it. It won't get you high. It has no psychoactive abilities. It's legal in all 50 states in the U.S. It might not be legal where you are watching this, so be sure you check. Do not do anything illegal. I do not advocate anyone ever do anything illegal, nor do I advocate anyone doing drugs. Um, uh, and possibly you're like that, and that's why you're here, because you want information about CBD and ways that it can help you. I do advocate that if people are interested in CBD, they consider American grown industrial hemp, both to support the local industry, which is a very exciting one. I've never seen, I think, an industry like this where there's a bunch of companies doing it, and they all seem to be quite good companies that offer excellent products. Their service is excellent, and so I'm not going to recommend any. I don't think I need to, do a little bit of research first, but there's a bunch of good companies selling these products that are now available. I advocate that people buy the actual plant material itself and make the products that you consume rather than buy pre-made products. There's a few reasons for that. Primarily, it's because you don't know if it's a product that's already made that you purchase. You don't know what it's made from, so there's always the risk of mold or contamination or the material being too old or whatever. You just simply don't know. And that's not to say that there's not a lot of excellent, reputable companies out there that are absolutely fantastic. Um, but with those, I would suggest, once you're used to using CBD, if that's the path you take, then you want to hold off on those until you know enough to evaluate whether a product you try is any good or not. And then, by all means, if you find a good product, and it's something you want to spend money on it, and then fine, that's great. But just be careful with that because um, the products are often made with inferior Chinese produced industrial hemp, which is not raised like this American product to be bred, to be high in CBD, and to be have actually very delightful qualities in terms of taste and aroma. They're really wonderful products to work with, if assuming you don't hate that kind of thing. Uh, so anyway, the other problem with Chinese industrial hemp is that it has the contamination problem and much lower CBD. Although you might say that, well, if it's just percentage CBD versus percentage CBD, it's apples to apples, so nothing else makes a difference. But typically, the CBD produced from Chinese industrial hemp can uh, be um, made from stems and parts of the plant that have less uh, a variety of the cannabinoids that you're looking for, because you're looking not just for CBD but also a number of other much lesser cannabinoids that provide what is essentially an entourage effect, where it's the sum is really greater than the effect is greater than the sum of the parts. There's a connection there that makes it much stronger, and that's what you want to be exposed to. The other thing is that the varieties grown in China tend to be 5% or less CBD, and very often much less, whereas some of the varieties that are now commercially available in the U.S. Are in the neighborhood of 16%, like Charlotte Sauce. That was the first one. But some of the newer ones, like Honolulu Haze and Casino Cookies, those are 23% coming. They're approaching 24%, which is an absurdly high concentration, which I think makes this particularly effective. And then the price is affordable enough you can consume it in large doses, because that combination of very fresh, high quality product at a very, very high concentration of CBD at an affordable way of consuming a dose large enough to be therapeutic. I think that makes a huge, huge difference. Um, in my case, I don't think that there was any effect whatsoever. I have no reason to believe there was any effect um, on my cancers from CBD, but CBD has been very helpful in reducing my otherwise inflammatory condition I suffer from. It makes my arms and legs move great, which is very useful to me during radiation, because one of the main approaches I used to get through radiation was increasing exercise and fitness activity, and I think CBD helped with that. The other thing it helped with was gout. I believe that the very high doses of CBD I've taken have essentially cured the gout that I had. It only started just over a year ago, and it was in my toes, but extremely painful as gout is. And my toes were locked up for almost a year, and I couldn't move them on their own. I could bend them by grabbing them, but it was intensely painful, and it was quite painful much of the time. And though naproxen worked for that, I just don't like the idea of taking drugs if I can possibly avoid it. So anyway, on with the show. I'm here to describe and show you what these products are. This would be the simplest way to do it, is to make a kind of canna butter, where you extract the CBD and other cannabinoids from the plant material in an oil base. I would recommend coconut oil. That works the best. And you use, if you're using trim, you use equivalent amounts of trim and coconut oil. If you're using the flour, which is much higher in CBD, then you use a lot less. The trim typically is a quarter of the strength of the flour. So anyway, here's what looks like a big giant jar of marijuana, but it is not. You would just reach in and grab a handful and plop it in. What I recommend using, I mean, you can buy expensive canna butter machines and they work great, but this works just fine. It's an old crock pot, and if you know anyone who's married, they probably have 12 of these in their attic or closets or whatever, and they'll happily give you one. Otherwise, you're looking about a $10 or $15 outlay. So anyway, you put it in on high, and then wait a while till it's warmed up. It's liquid. You stir it around a bit and let it run. Then once it's melted, let it go on high for 15 minutes, and then put it on low, and then give it a good stir. And once an hour, stir it, and it'll take about 4 hours before it's ready. You'll know by the smell, and the more you do it, the more familiar you become with the smell. It's quite a pleasant smell, but it is a strong one, and it will fill the kitchen. So if people in your family don't like it, then only do it when they're not around, or do it in some other kitchen, because it is a very strong smell. Anyway, moving right along to show you some of what the flower looks like. It looks basically exactly like marijuana, and here's it. You store it like you would marijuana because it's essentially the same plant. It's just that it doesn't have the parts that make you paranoid or high or anything like that. It doesn't have that effect. The only effect you'll notice, if anything at all, is a general feeling of well-being, and sometimes it feels nice in your shoulder blades and upper shoulder. That might start about 10 minutes after you've consumed it. Other than that, you'll just feel good. But if it's having an effect on your gout and you stop feeling gout, well, you notice that fairly quickly. And I actually had the sensation of feeling the gout leaving my toes. It was remarkable, and unless it was my imagination. Anyway, here's what it looks like. I'll bring it up to the camera so you can see it. It looks just like regular marijuana, except it doesn't have the little shiny little tiny crystals called trichomes that contain a lot of the THC that's found in marijuana. What you'll need to do if you're going to consume it from the flower is a grinder. Now this is an elaborate grinder, or you can just use a simple small grinder. And I'll be using this in just a moment because we're going to use a vaporizer. Now, actually, yeah, why don't we go ahead and do that? I will put a small amount of this beautiful Honolulu haze, almost 24%. So it's very, very high in CBD. And I'm going to get a nice big bud. And I'm just going to slash it in. This is a grinder that came with the vaporizer that I use. It's a kind of an odd machine. It did unfortunately cost a lot of money, but I found that worth it. I'm recommending that people use a dry herb vaporizer rather than smoking it. Although you can smoke it, you can roll joints and smoke it in pipes, and it smells just like marijuana, and it also causes all the bad things to your lungs that marijuana does, and it produces a tar. So it's much, 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 much healthier for you to use a vaporizer. You can use vaporizer pens. They're quite nice. They have their uses. A little one like this, about $35. It only operates on one temperature, though. It's a very nice temperature, but it's only the one. So preferable would be something like this, which is a more elaborate one, and it allows you to set the temperature to whichever you like, which is useful because different cannabinoids are released better at different temperatures, and also the flavors that are found in the terpenes will be released at different temperatures, and so having the ability to change temperatures gives you a lot more control over the effects you'll get and the enjoyment that you'll have. So I have used the grinder and dumped out a bunch of this powder. I'm going to put it in this capsule here. This is all this expensive thing called a volcano is from Germany, and it's made to extremely high German engineering standards, if I may employ a cliche there, but it's, in this case it's quite true. It's quite a remarkable machine, as you'll see in a moment. I put the top on, and then I'm going to turn this around here and show you because it's really quite something. I'm going to fill this bag with vapor of warm air pushed through this capsule. Now, here we go. You get to watch this. It's like making Jiffy Pop popcorn if you are an old person like me and remember that. So I'm going to turn on the blower and then count to about 5 seconds and then put it on, wait till it fills. And there we go. Now it'd be great if you could be here. You could have just a trial moment, momentary trial there, but I'll have to do that for you. It is very pleasant. However, if you have asthma, it might trigger your asthma. And if you do it too much without taking a break, you will get a sore throat. But other than that, it does not stink up the house. It smells a little bit like burnt popcorn, and that's about it. So anyway, now in this case I set it at a temperature, so this looks almost like smoke coming out. It is not smoke. There is no combustion involved. This was done at a temperature of about 355 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is in a very, a close range of about 20 degrees either way, that is most effective for releasing the CBD as the warm air is forced through the little capsule with the ground up flour. So anyway, back to our canna butter. After 5 hours of cooking and getting to be just the right smell, we'll then let it cool off, and we'll put it through a strainer into a jar and put that in the fridge. And I've made a cup of tea, in this case green tea. It's a very nice way to start or end your day. I put in about a 1/4 teaspoon would be a normal dose. And typically you would have that once a day, but if you want a stronger amount of CBD in your life, doing that twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening would be ideal. But if you just enjoy it, there's no reason why not to do it, because there are no adverse side effects to consuming this, which is quite nice. And then you just take your tea and stir it up and have a sip. It looks like a tiny bit of oil floating in the top, which is what it is. It's a tiny bit of oil floating on the top of your tea. So it never completely blends, it just floats on the top, but it tastes quite nice. So anyway, there's one more thing I recommend, is that rather than throw away the what's called AVB, already vaped bud, it's typically referred to as AVB. You would take your AVB, because it's still got CBD in it that couldn't be extracted through the vaporization process, and it's essentially been decarboxylated by the process of vaporizing. It goes really well if ground into a powder and added to cooking. You could do it with cookies or stews or anything really. But the most ideal and traditional form is the brownie. You would want to have with this stuff anywhere from 5 to 10 tablespoons of ABB. Put it in a mill of some sort, like a coffee grinder, and run it through till it's a fine powder, like the powder that you would find in an espresso, for example, or just flour, for bread flour. And then cook it according to usual directions. I recommend, and I do this whenever I can, using hemp oil, just to be extra complete about it. It doesn't have any CBDs or anything, but it goes along with the flavor. But olive oil is excellent with cheapo brownie mix, I find. And that way all of the flour, especially if you're consuming a lot of flour as opposed to mixing with trim, will make your dollar go a little further. The going rates for something that's just over a pound of trim would be about $100. For the flour, they will run up to anywhere from $60 to $80 for an ounce. So that's considerably more expensive than the trim, which is why I use the trim almost exclusively for making this wonderful canna butter stuff for adding to tea. You can also just eat it too. It's put it under your tongue for sublingual extract. It works quite well. It's also nice having a big jar of something that looks like a big jar of marijuana, because it freaks people out, but it's not marijuana, trust me. So anyway, that's about it. Feel free to put any questions at the bottom, and to the best of my ability, I will attempt to answer them. And I hope you had as much fun as I did. And I will see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.